I'm Marc Weber of the Computer History Museum, and I'm here today on November 18th, 2011, with Danny Cohen, who's a pioneer of the Arpanet, of voice over IP, interactive applications over networks, and a number of other areas in computing. So thank you for doing this.
You're most welcome, Marc.
And I'd like to really just start at the beginning. I mean, could you tell us a bit about where you grew up and what were your interests as a child?
Hi. I was born and grew up in Israel. When I was in about, I believe around high school age, I read in the newspaper about electronic brains, which we call computers today. But the idea of having machines that act like a brain was very fascinating, and got me interested in this area.
And were your parents in technical fields or
My father was an electrical technician, but between that work and electronics and computers, there was a very big gap, especially since computer didn't exist yet.
And your mother was interested in?
My mother was not technical at all. My mother was very good at people, reading people, understanding people, taking care of people. My father, on the other hand, was very technical in everything he did in life. I must be somewhere in between the two, I hope.
And what sorts of things interested you as a child?
Yeah, as a child in Israel, I spent most of my time in a youth movement. And we tried to be as much as possible out of the house and be outside playing with friends. And one thing that we liked probably most was walking and hiking through the deserts of Israel. About half of Israel was desert, and some of them, like near the Dead Sea, was very attractive for hiking. We used to hike there a lot, and we did lots of things that our parents would never approve if they knew what we did. For example, when we were in the high school seniors, I, with two other friends, at night went from Israel into Lebanon to the Litani River there and back. If we were caught by the Lebanese doing it, we most likely would not get out alive out of that. But it was sort of a challenge that we could not resist. And we do it, which was one of the least responsible things that I did in my life for absolutely no reason, except knowing that we were not supposed to do that.
Would you swim in the river?
No, we did not swim in the river, but we took some water in canteens and pretended that the water were different than the tap water, which it was. How about let's look at it. Let's look at what we have, so we make sure that this is right. This is right.
And so, but the youth movement you were in what was the goal of the movement?
The goal of the youth movement was very complicated to explain. The youth movement were aligned with political parties. And so, the one I was in HaShomer HaTzair, which is a youth movement that belonged to a slightly leftish a party. So most people my age somehow belong to parties that are on the left of center.
And were you interested in, I mean, you described the electronic brain article when you were a teenager, but did you like, math or science or technical things when you were younger?
Yes, I always wanted, I was always interested in math. And I was delighted to hear that computers and math went together, which was easy when the computers hardly existed. In Israel, computers were somehow offshoot of math and electrical engineering, obviously. But was more mathematical than most places in the States.
And where did you grow up in Israel?
Yeah, I grew up in Haifa, which is a city on the north beaches of the Mediterranean.
And you grew up in the town?
And I grew up in town. The other important thing about Haifa is that the Technion, the Israeli Institute of Technology, also is in Haifa. So most computer work in Israel started at Haifa, which was very convenient.
And did you have brothers or sisters?
No, I did not.
And what did you like to do for fun when you were a kid?
The number one element of fun was being away from the parents, being together with a group of kids, doing things like, as I say, hiking before, or sailing, or whatever.
And what were your best and worst subjects in school?
The worst subject was history, which is really funny given that my kid, which is very talented in mathematics, graduated with honors from Oxford in history. Yeah, and I'm sure that my history teacher is laughing in her grave.
Well, it skipped a generation.
About it. Yeah, my best subjects were obviously mathematics and physics. Chemistry was a far third, and all the rest far, far behind it.
And so describe your first, you had read about them, but describe your first actual exposure to computers.
The first exposure to computers I had when I learned to program. And I was programming in language very similar to Fortran. I think it existed a little before Fortran.
And where and when was this?
And this was in the Weitzman the one in the Weitzman Institute was a machine that came from Sweden. It was a very small machine. I think have a few thousand registers that served also as memory. Used rotating drum, which was not rotating very fast. The machine was called the Vegematic, or something similar. It was built in Sweden, and this was in about 1961. Fortran, I was exposed to Fortran much later, and Fortran was sure high-level language compared with Vegematic.
But so this was already in college then?
Say again?
But you graduated in 1963.
Yeah, so this was during my third year in college.
So that was the first time you actually laid hands on a computer terminal?
Yeah, on a computer. I don't remember if this machine even has a keyboard. but we did everything with bits using hexadecimal notation.
And that was at your university then, at the Technion?
You know, the only computer in Israel that were reasonable to use at the time were in the Weitzman Institute.
Ah, true.
So I went to the Weitzman Institute like once or twice a week, and I got a machine for a few hours, which needless to say were always the worst hours of the day, like midnight. And I programmed those machines, and I was very happy to compute the integral of sine x from 0 to pi, for example, on a machine that doesn't have any high-level language.
Yeah, so you were really, spending a lot of time writing the programs and then going in
and try to run it.
Just a few hours to, yeah.
Mm.
But was this for a course?
No, it was because I wanted to learn about computers. So I went to Weitzman and met Professor Pekeris. He was the head of the computer department in Weitzman, and he built a computer called the Weizsack that they used, and it replaced an older computer, the Vegematic, that was built somewhere in Sweden, I think.
So you were getting access to the older computer?
Yes, I was introduced to very old computer.
And so you were just informally going and using it, but did you?
I came to Weitzman and met him and told him I want to use a computer. And he asked me, do you know anything about computing? And I say no. So he said, no problem, and gave me a manual and say, here it is, why don't you compute sine x, integral of sine x from 0 to pi? And that was my first exposure to computers. Luckily, I knew someone who also worked there, and he helped me. This was Amir Pnueli, which by the recipient of several ACM awards, that unfortunately died about 2 years ago.
And so he was at the Institute?
Yes, and he guided me through learning about computing.
And did you have any goal in doing this, or just curiosity?
Curiosity was more than enough. Great motivator.
And what did you study at university?
In Israel, like most of Europe, unlike the United States, you choose your area of study when you enter the institute. So first year student in math and first year student in chemistry have practically zero in common, except physical education and foreign language and this kind of stuff. So by the time I finished 4 years in Technion, I had more than twice the math that a 4-year graduate of MIT had.
But what was your actual course of study? I mean, what was your degree in?
My degree was in applied math.
And so, right. And so, in your third year, you started playing with a computer on your own.
Mm-hmm.
Did you immediately think this might be something that could become a career?
I never thought about career because I did not think about that far into the future. But it was fun and it was very inviting community and environment. So since it was fun, I stayed with it.
And what did you like about
It is like solving crossword puzzles, I think. The challenge of solving a problem, not because you have to, but because you want to.
And do you like puzzles in general?
Depends what kind of puzzles. Crossword puzzles, no.
But you like challenges and.
But you like to be challenged by a good puzzle.
Do you like mathematical puzzles?
I love them.
More than words.
Yeah, it's not of the less words, the better.
So then, your next step was the United States.
The next year after.
What made you want to come to the United States?
Because the computer technology.
So you took the computers quite seriously then?
Yeah, so I went I got my bachelor in 63. And from 63 to 65 I worked on a master in Israel. Most of my time was devoted to computers.
Okay, so also at the Technion, a master's.
Yeah, which I never finished because I was invited to come to MIT to study applied mathematics. So I left the Technion and went to MIT to.
But who invited you? How were you invited?
There was some program that was controlled by a few professors from Harvard. Yeah, the only name I remember now is Goldstein. I think Sydney or Harvey Goldstein. He was professor of applied math at Harvard. And what he did mostly was fluid mechanics. So I thought this would be interesting. It turned out it was not. So in '67 I moved from MIT to Harvard to work with Ivan Sutherland. Ivan Sutherland is a person who practically invented computer graphics.
But so at the Technion, those 2 years, you were still going straight math direction, but doing computers on the side for your master's during those 2 years working toward the
About.
Right. But were you, the fact that you didn't finish suggests that you were bored or frustrated somehow.
Yeah, because it was not interesting. And when the Technion we got the first computers, the first computer of computer science, I was probably practically the only person with any experience with computers, because the summer between my third year and fourth year, between my junior and senior years in college, I spent the summer in Israel working on a TVA computer. TVA is the Tennessee Valley Authority, and they had a big computer which was an IBM 704.
And this was in the summer, which summer then?
This was 62 to 63.
Okay. And so that gave you a taste of
computing.
Something that, right, a different possible future.
Yes.
So that made you less satisfied with what you were doing.
Yeah, I was convinced that I wanted to do computer work. And for some reason I got interested in computer graphics. And once I heard that Ivan Sutherland was at Harvard, which was up the street from MIT, I was delighted to jump ship and move from MIT to Harvard.
But if you were exposed to computers already by '63 with the TVA, why did you stay in math?
What did I say?
You went to MIT still doing math, right?
I returned to MIT doing math.
Right.
But at that time, I already discovered that I was very interested in graphics. one of the things that I did for TVA was connecting a calcomp plotter to the 704 and doing all this required software so other people could draw all kind of things. Once we do that, I start drawing 3D objects like buildings. And once I do that, I generated stereo images. So you could see it in stereo. Yeah.
How? You had to separate the eyes.
No, you did it on 2 pieces of paper and have something of plastic that you buy, usually in a souvenir store of a national park. And then you generate images that would fit that size and be in the right distance.
And so, but this was for fun during the TVA project.
It was absolutely for fun. But it changed, it focused me on graphics.
And were you interested in non-computer graphics? Did you enjoy drawing, or were you a graphics person?
I was not a graphics person.
So it was more the challenge of it.
But it was I wanted the computer to be a graphics computer.
Why?
Not to change me. And once I discovered about how to do images on a 704, which was all static, then the next challenge was to do motion, to introduce motion. And the challenge in doing all these kind of images was doing a thing like flight simulations, where there is not only motion, but much of the image is behind you. And so there are lines that start in front of you and end behind you, and you have to clip them to the right shape, in the right place, in the right size, where all of that is changing. And if you want it to be really like flight simulator, you have to do it in a certain time frame of, say, 15 to 60 frames a second. So all of that together was another challenging, interesting problem.
And the 704 was not designed as a graphics machine in any way. Did it even have? You must have had some sort of video terminal at some point.
No, the 704 didn't have any video. It is the calcom plotter, to draw static images.
But so you were hoping to generate frames that could be run as a movie then?
Yeah, so we did the frames one at a time. And then only later I managed to have computers that could do it in real time.
But what were you writing programs in?
Pardon?
You were writing programs in what language at this point?
On the 704, I believe it was Fortran. It was Fortran.
And how did you? You were creating your own programs to a large extent.
Yeah, most of them were my own programs. When we got the calcom plotter, we didn't have any software, so I had first of all to make software just to draw lines, and then to draw more and more complicated objects with different relations. And the challenge was to do it as fast as possible, such that it would fall into the time constraints of dynamic machines.
And so you were doing this sort of in your, this was not part of your official work, so you're doing this on your own time.
Everything is your own time, even if it's official.
Yeah. And so you spent the summer in Tennessee then?
I spent the summer in Tennessee, which was very interesting. And when I came back, I was more interested in graphics. And luckily I met Ivan Sutherland, and which was about 46 years ago, or something awfully close to that. I think it's 44 years ago. I met Ivan, and Ivan convinced me that I want to leave MIT and join him at Harvard.
How did you meet him?
I'm sorry?
How did you meet Ivan?
A friend of mine, Barry Wessler, told me that Ivan is giving a class, and I said, "Who is Ivan?" And then he told me about Ivan and what Ivan did. Yeah, most important was Sketchpad at that time, and it was very attractive. So I went to Harvard and met Ivan, and then Ivan invited me to his office to discuss problems. And it turned out that I knew how to do 3D clipping and he did not. So he immediately accepted me to his group.
Because you knew from experimenting with the TVA.
Yeah, I was a better mathematician than Ivan, and therefore for me it wasn't a challenge.
But also you had been thinking about computer graphics when you did
Yes.
704 with the TVA.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that. And what was your first impression of Ivan?
I was amazed how fast he was thinking between hardware and software and trading one for the other. I usually used to think about hardware as a given and cannot be changed, and software is where all the changes are. And Ivan said, let's think how we will do it at hardware. And from that point, we continued pursuing how to have our algorithm done in hardware. Bob Sproul, in his book on computer graphics, described with much detail the algorithm, which he named as Cohen Sutherland 3D clipping. And I was surprised how many times people in places I've never heard about come to me and say, I taught your algorithm in class.
And how did you sat in when I interviewed Barry Wessler, but tell, and he talked about meeting you, but talk about when did you meet Barry Wessler and what was your impression of him?
I met Barry in one of those summers, probably 65, 66, plus minus a year or two. Barry was working for DEC, and we just got a DEC machine, which was a DEC 338.
At MIT, right? At that point. You were at MIT still?
No,
right?
at that time, I was at MIT, but I was the summer working for Adams Associates, which was a software house, contracting work for Lincoln Lab. And we, meaning Lincoln Lab, got the DEC 338. And I was supposed to program it, and there were problems with it. The machine did not do what it was supposed to. So we drove to DEC, which was about an hour drive from where we were, to complain about it. And the engineer that was assigned to solve our problem was Barry. And we had something funny happening. It turned out that Barry was in charge of checking machines. And he found out that there was a serious bug in the machine. And the bug was that whenever you try to set some table, the most significant bit was always on, whether it was supposed to be or not. So in order to be able to continue the testing, Barry put the table always in a place that would need this bit to be on. And this, which was obviously the wrong thing to do, because it made all the machine pass the test. And our table just happened to be in the lower memory, with that bit being 0, so obviously it did not work. And they were very embarrassed to find out the diagnostic test instead of discovering problems, just circumvent them by jumping over them, which was a good thing to do to accelerate the testing, provided that you remember to check for it, which they didn't.
And did Barry get in? But that was Barry's idea, or not?
No, Barry did all the right things. His management did the mistake.
Right.
So luckily, when he saw this problem, he said, "Oh, I know what the problem is," and had an instant fix for it.
And what was the fix?
Pardon?
What was the fix then?
No, he knew that if you put the table in a different place, then it would work, which is not a fix for the problem, but it makes the problem disappear unless you need to put the table elsewhere.
And so this is how you met him.
This is how I met Barry.
And
then we were both MIT students, and we used to meet each other always on, say, Wednesday from between 2 and 2:15 when we changed lecture rooms. And every week, since we have the same schedule, every week we would pass each other in the corridors and just say hi. And one day he stopped me and said, "Do you know Ivan gives this class?" And I asked, "Who is Ivan?" And he told me, and he convinced me that I want to meet Ivan. He was right.
And so then, once you met Ivan and you switched to Harvard, right?
Yes.
And what were you doing at Harvard then?
I was a student of applied math, which was computer science. And I worked with Ivan, and I had so much fun that I would probably stay at Harvard to this very day, except that Ivan moved away to Utah. And so I had to move away, and I didn't want to move to Utah, so I stayed at Harvard.
And so but you got a PhD at Harvard then?
At Harvard.
And in applied math.
Applied math meant computer science.
And you had some very interesting classmates. Who was around at the time?
Bob Sproul, that stays with Ivan for the rest of his professional life. Harry Lewis, which is a dean at Harvard now, I believe in math, not in computer science, but I'm not sure. Art Prever, which I forgot what he did later, but for a long time he was interested in drawing data on CRTs and analyze the data, something that I did not appreciate at the time. And several other people whose name I can't remember.
And where were you living in that period?
Very close to Harvard, such that when we needed babysitters, we could always find someone.
So you were already married?
I was already married and having a little kid.
When did you get married?
I think in 1961.
Ah, so very early, when you were still at university.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
How did you meet your wife?
We were in the same high school together.
And were you in the same youth group?
No, we were in very similar, but not the same.
And was she interested in computing type things?
Absolutely not.
What was she interested in?
What was she interested in? I think in teaching. She was a music teacher. And I really don't remember that much.
But then, so she taught music, I mean, she went to university, or?
No, she did not. She was a high school teacher of music, and she played the recorder.
And so she could do that all the places that you moved.
Mm-hmm.
It was fairly easy for her. Okay, and then you had a child when?
The child was born in about 1994, about 1964. I can't believe I don't remember and have to compute.
But you were already in Cambridge then?
Yes, we lived in Cambridge, near Redcliffe, which was the source of babysitters.
You didn't want MIT. There were no women, or very few at MIT.
At MIT there were very few, but it was hard to tell who was who.
Who was the babysitter?
Yeah, because many of the Redcliffe ladies looked more like boys than girls.
From Radcliffe or from MIT?
I'm sorry, at MIT.
Right.
Yeah. So Redcliffe looked like girls.
Yeah. So you had babysitters and you could walk to Harvard.
Yes.
Did you like Massachusetts?
I absolutely loved Cambridge.
Why?
It's hard to tell now because part of it is because of the people around me, and which I'm sure were replaced by other people which probably are not very different in the time, but I liked the environment and the company I was in at the time.
And did you continue to do outdoor things?
Yes, skiing and skating and rowing and forgot what else you do in Boston.
But the group of people you knew around Harvard, MIT, Lincoln Labs, a very interesting group.
Yes.
And when did Ivan go to Utah?
Probably around 67 or 68.
Okay, so that left you...
I think 68.
And that left you at loose ends.
Yeah, but even though he went to Utah, he stayed as my advisor. So he was on my committee at Harvard. And one day he came to me and said, you know, Danny, you better think about finishing. And I said, oh, what shall I do? And he said, very simple. He showed me several of work that I did. And he said, don't you see there is a common thread in all of them? You do lots of incremental computers to solve big problems. So why don't you call your dissertation incremental method for computer graphics and have 5 chapters, each of them would be another piece of work you did before. I thought it was a great idea. And by following it, I managed to get out.
And what were the 5 chunks?
One of them was generating curves or arc, curves, what you call them, not whatever. And one of them was about hidden lines, using an algorithm that was also used by John Warnock later in his dissertation.
But you came up with the algorithm?
Yeah, I came out with a major modification.
Yeah, because Ivan Sutherland also had. No, who was it?
I'm sorry.
But sorry, modification to
the Warnock algorithm,
right,
that make it, hundreds of times faster, and something with Petri nets that would be too complex for me to remember now. And I forgot what else. And one of the things, I had a new way of generating curves. And in order to show that it's better, I had to compare it with something. So I invented another way of doing it. It turns out that the second way was better than the first. So we changed the words to say here are two methods. And this one is better than that because blah, blah, blah.
And a method for generating arcs, you said?
Pardon?
A method for generating...
Curves.
Curves, okay. Because you had said arc before, but
Yes.
curves in general.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the curves were, the important curves were circles and ellipse and parabola and hyperbola, better known as conic sections. And I used some mathematics that was probably foreign to most of the other students around. As I told you before about MIT days, I had more mathematics in Technion than most students get here.
So that, and you put that to practical use.
Yes.
So that took care of your dissertation then.
Mm-hmm.
And then what did you want to do next?
Then I was convinced to join USC ISI in Los Angeles.
But you had met, I mean, you knew like Larry Roberts and Len Kleinrock before you left the East Coast.
Yeah, I knew Larry and I knew Len.
So how did you meet them?
Yeah, Larry was using the computer consulting company that I worked for. So he came with different problems, and usually it was my job to solve them and implement the solution. For example, he wanted to, when he moved from MIT, from Lincoln to the Pentagon in Washington, he wanted to have the same computing environment that he had on the TX2 in Lincoln. So in order to provide it, we were connecting the TX2 in Lexington, Lincoln Lab, over telephone lines to a DEC 338 in the Pentagon. And the 338 pretended it was the TX2, and such that it allows one to sit in Washington and have access to all these programs that were running in Lincoln. For me, that was the first entry to computer communication and got me interested in it.
And what year would that have been?
This was 68, I believe, around 68.
Right, when he had been started at ARPA after.
Yes, and then he moved to ARPA and started the Arpanet.
And so, but when he used to come to the company you were working at, I mean, you enjoyed spending time with him, I take it.
I'm sorry?
You felt a connection with him when you were working for the consulting company.
Yeah.
Tell me your impressions of him at the time.
The first time I came, I went to the other company called Adams Associates, and I was interviewed. And at the end of the interview, the president of the company said to me, "You are a math major." Yeah. And he said, "Here is a paper written by Larry Roberts. Why don't you read it and see that you understand it, and in 2-3 days we'll meet again and we'll talk about it." So I read the paper and found several typos and several mistakes. And one mistake, there was a conjuncture that he say, "I think that blah, blah, blah happened, but I did not prove it." And another one was, he had a wrong example that was false. There were several things like that. So I came back to Adams Associates and said, "I read the paper, but there are lots of mistakes in it." And then they looked at each other and said, "We have a problem because we told Larry Roberts that we'll program it. And if there are mistakes in it, you cannot program it. What shall we do? Are you willing to go to Roberts and tell him that about those mistakes?" And I say, "Sure, being math major means that if you prove something, it is right, and if you disprove it, it is wrong. It's not a matter of being afraid." So, but they were afraid of talking with Larry, so they sent me. So I showed those things to Larry. He was aware of most of the things that I had to show. The conjuncture that was wrong when he saw it, he said, "You're right. No wonder I could not prove it." And there was something else, and then he said to me, "Finally, someone really read my paper, this paper." It turns out Ivan also read this paper but did not understand it. He didn't catch any of those problems.
Which paper was it?
It was the paper is called the homogeneous coordinates for presenting 3D object or blah, blah, blah. Something like that. So that was my first meeting with Larry, was when I have to show Larry that he had mistakes, and he was very happy that I caught them before, rather than having them in a technical report and someone else external catching them.
Well, and also the error that you found that prevented him proving it would have, he couldn't have done much with it until someone found the error, right?
Yes. Exactly. I saw, we saw last week, or 2 weeks, on the 29th at UCLA, I saw Larry. He didn't change much. I bet I did. In these 40 plus years that I know him.
But I mean, you guys, the interaction is probably the same, right?
Probably not very different. We have different styles we developed with it. Yeah.
But I think, who was saying, I guess it was Len Kleinrock saying that Larry Roberts was quite a practical joker.
Yes.
Or was that your experience too?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the only time, not the only time, but the only time I remember now with Larry. Larry was collecting coins, old coins. And somewhere I found in some store a postcard saying something like, "The other day you stopped in our office and you left and you used to pay a 1907 quarter," or something like that we sold for $1,500 to a collector. And Larry saw it, and he immediately said, "Oh, that's probably Danny sent it." And Barry, that was there, asked him, how can you tell? And he said, "Because 1907 quarter doesn't get $1,500, it only get $1,200, something like that." He took it totally serious. But he could see through that it was a joke. But with Larry, you could do it. There were lots of people you could not do it with.
Yeah, well, they would not see through it. So you became friends or acquaintances?
Acquaintances, I think, would be a better word.
But Barry Wessler you became friends with in that period?
Yeah, Barry and I are good friends.
So Larry, you didn't really socialize much?
No, he socialized with other people. I've never been in his house, and I don't know if he was ever in mine. Okay. But with Larry, I've been in his place many, many times.
Barry, yeah.
With Barry. And he was in my place.
And Len Kleinrock you met around there?
Around the time I moved to Lincoln.
So how did you meet Len Kleinrock, though?
I don't remember, but he was most likely in Lincoln Lab. And then when we discovered that both of us going to Los Angeles, the connection got more tight. And
so ISI was starting around that period.
I joined ISI, I think, in 72. In 73,
okay.
And they started at 72.
But so first you just went to USC, right?
ISI and USC are the same.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, USC is the larger university,
exactly.
And ISI is the institute.
Yes. So I think it was Bob Kahn who saw my flight simulation at Harvard.
True, that was still at Harvard. Talk about
Yeah.
it. Well, please talk
And
about it.
Bob noticed that the difference between my program and all the others, that mine was running in real time. When you run in real time, there are all kinds of flow control issues that are different than non-real time. And since he was interested in packet voice, interactive voice, he understood that he needed real time.
But this is later on. Sorry, please do talk about, I missed the fact that the flight simulator, you were still at Harvard. So talk about the flight simulator program.
When I came to Harvard, the first thing that Ivan asked me to do was to rewrite my flight simulator to run in the Harvard environment.
But you had started it at MIT? When did you start your flight simulator?
The flight simulator started probably 65.
At MIT then?
No, I'm trying to... No, the flight simulator was done before, first time it was done was on SEL computer, Sierra Echo London. And I did it for the consulting company, Ivan Sutherland, which sold it to SEL to demonstrate how fast the SEL computers are.
So this was when you were doing side jobs but going to MIT?
Yeah, yes. And when I moved to Harvard, the first thing that Ivan asked me to do was to rewrite the program for the Harvard environment. And I did it, and that was the only real computer game probably in existence. And lots of people spend nights doing flying the simulator at Harvard. In some meeting, someone came to me, someone I never met, and he'd say, "Did you write a flight simulator at Harvard?" And I say, "Yes." And he said, "You have no idea how many nights you cost me, because I used to come here and play with it hours and hours to no end."
And it was running on
the Harvard PDP-1.
And so with a graphics.
With the graphics of the PDP-1. Later we got, and for another consulting company, I wrote a PDP-15 version of the same thing. And when the Arpanet came to being, we rewrite the program such that the graphics happened at Harvard on the PDP-1, but the heavy computer happened at MIT on the PDP-10, and the two of them were connected over the ARPA internet. So when I came into the room, I would go to the PDP-10 at Harvard and make him send a message to the PDP-1 at Harvard, download all the programs the PDP-1 has to run. The PDP-1 will check the input devices, which were the throttle and several switches. There were no pedals. And this would cause the computer at MIT to compute your dynamics and compute what you should see from where you are. Send it to Harvard, which would display it, check the stick and the throttle and send it to MIT. It would update the position and the image and send it to Harvard. And so the next morning I called ARPA and told Larry that it was working. Larry could not believe that it was working, and he thought that I was telling it what I want to write, so asked me when do I think it would work. And I say, "Larry, it already did. Last night it worked." And he said, "No, I want to know when it will work on the computers." We had a very funny conversation until he was convinced that it was already running. And it was awfully exciting to see, because he didn't expect the Arpanet to be that fast.
But when you talked about early games, I mean, you probably saw Space War in that period, right?
Yes, Space War was the first real game. In Space War, you see always the image from the outside.
Right.
And the clipping you have to do was of points, not of lines, which is very simple.
And I know that you're a pilot now, but were you interested in flight? When you did why did you do a flight simulator?
Well, the flight simulator I did because it was an interesting graphics problem. But this gave me a taste of flying and convinced me that I want to learn how to fly real airplanes.
So you did it in reverse?
I did it in reverse, and my flight instructor told me that I was the first student that knew how to fly in the instrument before knowing how to fly visual. Because I taught myself lots of things about airplanes on my simulator. Unfortunately, most of them were wrong. I thought that if you push the stick, if the throttle, it makes the plane go faster. And if you want to go high, to climb, you pull the stick. It turned out that's practically backward. If you want to, real airplane, if you want to go higher, you push the throttle. Not the stick. With the stick, you can point the airplane up, but it would go down if you don't manage the power correctly.
So the flight simulator was based on your ideas of how a plane flew?
On my, it was based on my non-informed ideas about the way I thought airplanes fly.
Okay, so you did the flight simulator as a graphics challenge. You moved it to Harvard and then the Arpanet. It's the first flight simulator general one that was not a specialized, sort of custom-made.
Yeah, the first one was made on the SEL 840, or 810, 840, I believe. Yeah. And it was displayed in the Fort Joint Computer Conference, probably of '66. And it was not far from the IBM booth where they displayed the 360s. It was practically a new computer. There were always more people looking at my simulator and standing in line to fly it for a few minutes than looking at the 360s.
And how did you control the simulator?
The simulator has a stick and a throttle and several switches. The switches did things like gear up, gear down, or something like that, which is low rate input output.
But so you created the stick, or you found an old? Was it from a real airplane or what?
No, we did not manage to find a real throttle, but then we found out. But then SEL built one.
So that's probably the first game controller then.
Pardon?
You could argue the first game controller.
Yeah, you could think about it. And now the issue is, do you want to count Space War or Space War.
But it didn't have a special controller then.
No, we used to do it with the key, with the switches.
Right. Ah. True. Okay, and so this, you were doing, I mean, your thesis included things you had learned in doing the simulator.
Some of them.
Okay. But the simulator was kind of a separate project, separate effort.
Yes. The simulator was important to learn how to do 3D clipping and how to do it fast.
But I guess I'm asking what was the relationship between the simulator project and your kind of main work, main academic work?
I don't remember. You can probably describe it 5 different ways, and all of them would be equally true.
But it was one of the projects you were
It's one of the
seriously
projects,
involved in.
yeah. And I have lots of fun during those days.
Were there any other projects that you were doing?
Yeah, we did. For example, we did a program that to draw bottles, the kind that used for perfume. So you could sit near a computer and in few minutes run tens of different shapes and do it interactively and compute, the volume of it. It turns out that in perfume industry, the shape of the bottle is more important than the smell. People don't appreciate it. But the main variant in perfume are the shape of the bottles.
And this is in your DVD, right?
Yeah, this one is on the DVD, that's how I remembered it.
And
there was another program that I wrote to teach my little kid that was probably 4 or 6 at the time, doing simple arithmetics. And it would show a face on the computer and say 7 plus 2 equal question mark. And if she entered the right answer, which I believe is 9, then the face would smile. If you have the wrong answer, then it would frown. And then it would have tears coming from one eye. If you make one more mistake, it would be tears from both eyes. And this is the first computer-aided instruction program I know. Time magazine came and showed her playing with it. And then it was on national TV, and for a while I would get some calls from some friends. Guess what? We opened our TV in Salt Lake City, and so your daughter playing with your computer.
And do you have that video now?
You have this video.
Oh,
now.
that's on the. Okay, yeah, that sounds familiar. And how many children do you have?
I have now a boy, which is about 25, and he wants to be a reporter in China.
But you're also talking about a daughter.
Yeah, and I have also a daughter that was killed in a traffic accident about 20 years ago.
Sorry.
It's okay.
But you had 2 children.
I had 2 children, one at a time. No, I'm sorry, there were 2 or 3 years and I had both.
So your daughter was very young when the math program was going.
Yes.
Yeah. So this was still back east.
I'm sorry, say again?
Still when you were in Massachusetts.
Yes, we did on the Harvard computer.
And what other programs did you do?
One funny thing, Bob Taylor came to visit when he was running ARPA. And Ivan was not sure whether we want to show him the program with my kid playing on the computer to the arithmetics. Then finally, because this was obviously not an ARPA military DoD program, and that's why he didn't want to show it to them. On the other hand, it was interactive, so he did want to, finally decided to show it. When Bob Taylor saw it, he jumped up and down and says, "That's absolutely perfect. I want it to run on my computer in the Pentagon." And he says, the reason is that congressmen would not understand the problem with the other things, but they would understand addition and subtraction. What he forgot to mention to us, that he has 2 kids that were in similar age. So on weekends he would bring them to the Pentagon and let them play with the computer. But he never mentioned it. Bob, if you ever see this tape, I hope you remember. Bye.
And any other program?
Pardon?
Any other programs in that period? Any other interesting programs or projects you were doing in that period?
Yeah, I think the one that by far was the most interesting was when we used a flight simulator together with the Arpanet. Because that was exactly what the Arpanet was building for. Being able to share computing power in remote places.
But it was also one of the first real-time applications over.
I believe it is the first.
Over any network.
Over any network. I believe it was the first network also.
And what you were doing, you said, with Larry Roberts, when he was connecting the TX.
Mm-hmm.
What year was that?
I believe in 66.
Okay.
Or 67. But that was the first time I did computer communication.
And did that, you said that excited you, the communication aspect.
Yeah, the people who understood, like Bob Kahn and Larry Roberts, were very excited. Most of the rest thought about it as a neat program and a great way to kill few hours to sit and practice landing and takeoffs.
No, but when you were already interested in interactive computing,
yes,
obviously,
mm-hmm.
with a flight simulator,
yeah.
Then when you saw the beginning of networking, that struck you as another area you wanted to explore?
Yeah, so Bob Kahn convinced Keith Sankefer, which was the director of USC ISI, that it would be better if I moved to ISI and work on real-time communication. So Keith managed to convince me that this would be a good thing to do, so I left Cambridge and joined them at ISI.
And you had met Bob Kahn in Cambridge. I mean, he was at BBN and so.
No, Bob Kahn at that time already moved to ARPA.
Oh, in the 70s, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Right. When did you meet Bob Kahn?
Say again?
So when did you meet Bob Kahn?
The real answer, I'm sorry, the answer is, again, about 68. No, just a second. I moved to 67, around 68 sometime.
So when he was at BBN, right?
No, when he already moved to ARPA.
Okay.
But it turned out that he and I were in the same dinner 2 or 3 years earlier in the fall joint computer conference in San Francisco. But we didn't really meet there. We just were both of us consulting or whatever. Once Bob moved to ARPA, things start moving fast and were much more interesting than life at Harvard.
And what was, until you went to ISI, I mean, what?
I'm sorry, say again?
You moved to ISI, you said around 72.
Mm-hmm.
So in the very early years of the Arpanet, you were following, you were interested, but what was your actual involvement?
Yeah. When I was at Harvard, we were just using the computer. We learned how to use the computers. I went to ARPA and told Larry Robert that I need a bigger disk for my computer. And Larry immediately said, no problem. You have it. And then he added it would be installed at ISI. And I said, Larry, are you crazy? ISI is the furthest west you can go, and we are in the east. Yeah. And he said, you are a smart guy. You figure out how to use it over the network. Sure enough, we did. But it was very strong motivation to have as much disk space as we needed through the network. That was much better way to motivate than writing a contract that would spell out exactly what we'll do and what they will do and everything. This was the spirit of those days. Another great example is that I came to Larry at Arpanet and say, I'm staying at Harvard, I'll be assistant professor and I need a bigger computer. He asked me, what do you want? And I say, I want a PDP-10. 30 days later, no, not around 30, but exactly 30 days later, he called and he said, you get it in a month. And another month later, I had it delivered to Harvard. It took two months from the time I asked for it verbally until it was working at Harvard. Yeah. The paperwork took another year or so to catch up with what happened. No proposal, no contract. Just you want it, you put it to good use. Here it is. The business office had a hard time handling it, but it was their problem, not mine.
And so then Bob Kahn got you to move to ISI in 72.
Yeah. I can't remember. I think I moved in 73. Either 72, probably 73.
And he was starting to think about packet voice by then, right?
About?
He was starting, the packet radio research had started.
No, it didn't start yet.
73, roughly.
Whatever it is, the packet radio came after the Arpanet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what did he want you to do at ISI?
When I came to ISI, they wanted me to participate in the packet voice project. So first we had to build an environment, the right environment with the right computers that would be able to do all the computing that was necessary. It was several cabinets at the time. Today it is a small fraction of one chip.
And what was your role in the project?
I ran the project, the ISI side of the project. But in addition, somehow I became the project engineer of the entire program that included like 8 or 10 different places, like BBNN and Lincoln and Utah and oh gosh, who else was there? And NSA. I can't believe my memory is that bad. It should be about 8 of them.
And how was the work divided between them?
When the group was put together, Bob Kahn made sure that he has all the tasks covered. And like he needed speech compression. And he knew that between Santa Barbara and SRI, there are people who can do that. We were assigned to solve the network problems. So BBN was assigned to change to improve some algorithms. So, every year we met 2 or 3 times. One of them always in the winter in Utah, when the skiing was good. And we were known as NSC was the name of our project for network secure communication. It was secure because it was digital. But most people thought it was called NSKey project. Because we made sure every year to have one meeting in good ski places.
So this was your annual meeting?
It was one of the 3 meetings that we ran every year.
And so you would all get together from the different sides.
We all get together, tell each other what we did, be totally open because we were not competing. We knew that if we do a good job, we will win, all of us. If we do a bad job, we lose, all of us. It wasn't a competition between us. It was competition between us and the problems. And Bob did a great job of dividing the work in a way that makes perfect sense. And the fact is that it's working.
And how many people total? Like a typical meeting, how many people would there be?
How many people would come to a meeting? Like 10 to 20.
No, so enough you could really get to know people.
Yes.
And did you have fun at the meetings?
Say again?
The meetings were fun?
Absolutely.
So what kind of places did you go?
I can think immediately about all the Utah meetings that we have. At one point, Utah lost their contract, but it did not stop us from keep going in the winter to Utah. They were very happy of us coming. We were very happy to go there. And there were people from Berkeley and Stanford. I'm not sure about Stanford, I'm confused. But Berkeley for sure, and Santa Barbara, and UC Santa Barbara, and Carla Harrison in Santa Barbara, and we at SRI, at ISI, and SRI, which I probably count twice, and BBNN. I think that's about it.
And who are some of the main people that stand out in your memory?
Bob Broderson. And the reason it stand out in my memory is because he was very active in The Voice, singing, and also in the VLSI project that came later. And I happened also to run Moses, which is a VLSI project, and he was in both of them. And so we were old friends by the time it met. And needless to say, Tom Stockham, that moved from Lincoln Lab to Utah.
And what was his role?
He was one of the gurus in speech processing. Yeah. What he did for fun and quote research at the time was to clean all the records of Caruso, singing his operas and removing the noise that was generated by the old equipment. So he spent hours to no end working on Caruso old recordings, which was not part of the project, but many of the techniques, the signal processing techniques that he used were used by us later in slightly different ways.
And was there much cross-fertilization with people working on audio processing in general, like for music and recording?
There was some, but not much.
And other people?
Yeah, I remember some SRI people, but I don't remember why I remember them.
And so you were sort of the chief engineer, as you said, for the whole effort.
Yes, I played this role. So we discovered in the very early meeting that Bob Kahn was an asset as a participant in a meeting, but it was very hard to handle as running the meeting, because he would pursue all kind of things that sound interesting at the time. So we changed it from him running the meetings to me running the meetings, and he participating like anyone else, And obviously he made a decision about funding and all of that.
And so he would come out regularly as well to ISI?
Oh, yes, he came out. NSA people came out.
NSA?
Several of them, pardon? Yeah. Then the NSA people used to say we work for the government. And they were the only one probably with ties on.
And obviously they were interested in encrypted communication, right?
Mm-hmm. I wish now that we spend more time listening to them. We didn't think security was a big problem, because after all, gentlemen don't listen to each other's packets, do they? So there was a meeting at SRI that started at 9 o'clock one day. That morning I flew in a Cessna 172 from Los Angeles to Palo Alto. Go to Palo Alto, got my bike from the back of the plane, and pedaled to SRI. And at 9 o'clock in the morning in the California sun, I was all sweaty. I got to SRI, took the elevator to the third floor, and rode the bike to the meeting room and start the meeting. The people from Washington, the NSA people were all with ties, and they could not believe what they saw. Not only that I was sweaty, but that I was running the meeting without a tie or whatever. It was a culture shock for them.
And how were you dressed?
How I was dressed? Probably with shorts and a t-shirt. The idea was that I'll arrive earlier and be able to take a shower and change before the meeting. But there was too much headwind or something else that delayed me.
You flew a lot to different meetings then?
Within California, meaning between Los Angeles, San Diego, San Jose, and Palo Alto, I flew a lot.
You had your own plane?
No, but I either rented or for a while I was in a group that together we owned few planes. One for Romeo, that was the name, the number, tail number of the 182 that I used to fly. One for Romeo.
And what was SRI like in that period?
SRI? SRI was a big place. And big places are usually different. There are more ties in bigger places.
But SRI also had a big contrast between like the people in the ARC lab who were real hippies, and then people like Don Nielsen who were complete straight arrows. And
Yeah. I think that most of the people we worked with were on the 0 to 100, where 100 is the full hippies. Yeah, we were, I think, in the 90, around 18 to 90.
And the NSA was the 0.
Oh, the NSA would probably be -5. No, but the concept that someone dressed differently can have some any technical understanding was foreign for them.
So they were very skeptical. And so what was the interaction like then when you?
No, they many times pointed that if we do it this way rather than this way, it would be easier or harder to encrypt. Most of the time they were not right because things happened later in different way, other than what they thought.
But would that affect really the meetings? I mean, did you have
No.
real disagreements with them?
No, did not. We said that was your opinion, fine. Yeah, you are entitled to have your opinion. And they would not argue with you. Yeah, usually NSA people are not allowed to ask questions. because this tells you, can tell you about their level of understanding. So many times they're not allowed to ask questions, so obviously not to argue. So it's not politeness, it is just to stop the information from flowing both ways.
So that made it easier to deal with the fact that they
It's easier to
didn't
handle.
necessarily.
It's easier to do it when they are in a meeting. When you talk one-on-one with them, they'll start the meeting and saying, look, I'm not going to ask you any questions, because if I ask you, you may learn about our level of understanding. So I may lose you in the first minute, or not at all, and it may be trivial for me or awfully complicated. I will not tell you. And you talk for an hour to a person, and he doesn't move his head even. He just sits there and look at you. And we are not used to talk one way.
Well, that's weird, yeah.
That's weird, right. They learn to do it.
But so they were funding part of the project.
If they funded it to ARPA.
Right.
So Bob Kahn has his budget, and some of the money came from ARPA, and some came from Navy, and some came from NSA, and some came from other sources. It wasn't my problem, it was his, which he handled beautifully.
But so NSA was really mostly there to observe. I mean, they were not contributing pieces of the
They were
project.
not contributing by any stretch of the imagination. TI also used to send people, and they would sit down and take notes and learn and ask lots of questions. And one day they surprised us all with integrating on one chip, the analyzer. The speak and spell technology totally came from us.
Did you know the people at TI involved with that?
Yeah, Higgins, Ricky or Dick Higgins, I forgot. Yeah, they did a great job for that time. The speak and spell was one of the biggest milestone in this conversion of voice communication from analog to digital. About the same time that they got their contract, there was a contract from IBM to develop connectors that would connect lots of pins needed for speech processing. Turned out they were not needed if you could do integration on one chip.
Did you know Granville Ott?
No.
Okay. TI.
The only name I know at TI was Higgins, which later recruited Randy Cole for my project.
Recorded what?
He recruited Randy Cole.
From your project?
A few years later.
So then tell me sort of the rough steps of the digital voice project. So
I'm sorry.
Roughly what were the stages or steps of the digital voice project for ARPA? I mean,
Yeah.
voice over IP.
I'm debating from which start I should.
Well, you arrived at ISI. You started.
No, it was obvious that we could that 50 the communication line on the Arpanet were 50 kilobits per second, not 64 but 50. When you connect, it was you use the Arpanet. If there will be no one on the network, then you could you get about say 40 kilobits, which was not allowed for audio because audio telephony required 64 bits per second, kilobits per second. So the first order of business was to compress to compress. So Bob Kahn understood it, that he need to compress. So part of the project were people who worried about speech compression. And there were the BBN people, the Lincoln people, the Utah people, and several others probably.
But at that point,
That affected me.
I mean, the telephone companies had done some, they had used digital lines prior to that.
But they used digital line with 64 kilobit per second. And the 64 was really 56, the 64. When you thought that you get 64, you really got you got most of the time 64, but part of the time 56. And the difference was that you did 8 kilohertz sampling. And you sample 8 bits at a time, so this gives you 64 times 8, which is 1544. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm confusing two things. Never mind. Every 8 bit, which means 1 bit per byte, could be was a control bit that sometimes was used and most of the time was not by the phone carrier for doing things like monitoring the quality of the connection. So if you want to do digital communication, you better not look at this bit because it is modified and it looks like errors. So 8 kilohertz times 7 bit is 56. Time 8 bit is 64. So the phone company say, here is 64. Well, for a short period of the time, it would be only 56, but it's basically 64. For us, it was better to treat as 56. So Bob Kahn understood that we don't have enough communication bandwidth. So therefore, he's the first thing he worried about and funded was the speech compression. Then he understood that he also need fast real-time communication, and he funded us and Lincoln, and I forgot, and mainly Lincoln and us to do the real-time stuff.
Who was at Lincoln for that?
Jim Forgy, which unfortunately is not with us anymore, and his team.
And so what was involved in doing that?
In doing networking?
The real time.
The real time. We had to have a format that would carry both serial numbers and timestamps, things that was not part of protocols in those days. Today, every real-time protocol has it. You need a serial number so you can tell early about packet losses and do whatever you should do, if any at all. And the timestamp so you know when to start playing something.
Right, the sequence to play it in.
Mm-hmm.
So you had to create that from whole cloth.
So our first protocols, since the flight simulator protocols have both time stamps and serial number, which are an obvious part of any real-time protocol nowadays.
But you think the flight simulator is one of the first examples?
I think it's the first, yes. I may be wrong, but...
But you think it is. Okay, so you adapted some of that from your work in the flight simulator.
The flight simulator taught us how to think about it.
So what was different then because of the fact that it was voice?
In a voice communication, if you lose a packet, then you just ignore it. Yeah. In a TCP kind of communication, if you lose a packet, you detect it, report it, resend it, which is 3 2 or 3 round trips around the country, which at those days cost 600 milliseconds each. So a single bit loss was like it could be a second or two of bad data. Yeah. So originally we have the Arpanet protocols. Then when we start connecting more networks, Bob Kahn and Vint Cerf proposed a TCP/IP protocol. And we didn't like it because the recovery from errors was too expensive for voice. Yeah, we didn't want, so it took us about 2 or 3 years of arguments to convince Vint to separate the real-time traffic from non-real-time traffic, which became separation of TCP between IP and TCP. The way TCP/IP was proposed by Bob and Vint was this one program called TCP that did both of them. Today we know better and do them separately.
But Bob was proposing this even when he knew that real time was a priority. I mean, how did Bob Kahn imagine this? Because in the early to mid-70s, he was both pushing real-time voice and pushing TCP as a unified standard.
Yeah,
how did he think it would work?
It was easier to convince Bob, and Bob said, now you have to convince me, now convince Vint, because he's the program manager and he should solve it. So first time I went to see Vint about it was before Vint even moved to Washington. He was still assistant professor at Stanford. And I tried to convince him, and it took about 2 years until I convinced him. And we separated IP from TCP. By the way, you are familiar with IPv4. The V4 meaning the fourth version of what? Do you know?
I heard you pose the question in your talk at Google.
As well, in that case,
but I don't remember the answer.
You should remember the answer. It was version 4 of TCP. TCP v1 and v2 and v3 were still TCP, were the original TCP/IP together. Right. In v4, we separate them. Yeah. And they stay separated happily to this very day.
And were other internetworking standards like CCLAD in France or the PUP work at Xerox, I mean, some of those dealt with this differently as well, right?
It took a long time for the ISO community to understand this division.
But did you have any contact with, say, Louis Pouzin in that period?
Louis came to several of our meetings. And as a result, they introduced CNLP, connectionless something network protocol. That was you supposed to send. You could send the packets one at a time, not as a stream. So the TCP opened a connection, virtual connection. CNLP connectionless protocol did not have the connection concept. So if there was an error, you skipped it and you delivered it rather than the protocol trying to fix it. So voice over IP sounds as if there was a IP and some smart person came and put a voice on top of it. No, it was the other way around. We had the voice running and we insert IP under it after taking it from the TCP part.
And did you have contact at all with the PUP people at Xerox?
We had some contact from time to time. John Schock from Xerox came to our meeting and participated and contributed a lot to the general effort.
What aspects?
Pardon?
What sorts of aspects?
He told us how PUP does it, for example.
And how about the people from NPL in England?
I don't remember them in our meeting, but the people from Norway.
Yeah, Paul Spilling. And
Yeah, Paul Spilling, and other people came to many of the meetings. Because after we did the voice over the Arpanet, we did the voice over the satellite. Yeah, and they handled the European side of the satellite connection. And from Norway, they connected to England. What we did, we violated probably many laws of the PTTs in Europe by having connection like that.
And what year would that have been that, by the time you were sending it over the SatNet?
Probably mid-70s, but I totally have a blank about. I'm looking for something else that I could relate to both, but I cannot find right now.
And Peter Kirstein, you knew?
Yes, Peter started coming to our meetings very early.
When you say our meetings, you are talking about voice over?
No, I'm sorry, I was in the voice and then I joined the network, NWG network working group.
Right.
So all that, when we talked about the TCP and all of that, it was in the NWG.
Right, that makes more sense.
Yeah, which I totally forgot
With
about.
Alex McKenzie.
Pardon?
Alex McKenzie.
No, Alex was before that. Alex was the Arpanet days.
Oh, no, he did some things further on.
And he worked, for example, on the original FTP protocol.
No, he stayed involved in some of the internet working. But
Well, he was also in charge of the network control center at BBN that monitored all the communication all the time. But I don't remember him as part of the NWG, but I might be wrong. I have no reason not to exclude him, but I really don't remember.
But in terms of voice, I guess I'm kind of curious whether would voice have been easier on some of the other protocols floating around at the time?
Yeah, see, the PUP ran at 3 kilobit per second. We ran it on lines that were shared a lot, but they were only 50 kilobit. So it is a factor of 3 times 20, like 60 times faster than it. So they didn't have to bother about compression the way we did. And without compression, they could run much faster. So PUP was ahead of us. What our project did was not building a system, but demonstrate feasibility. It was totally impractical in the cost of mid-60s and 70s to do the things. And therefore, when we were done, so there was a hibernation period of a couple of years before voice over IP became practical.
So when were you done?
Say again?
When were you done, so to speak?
There was a very smooth transition from voice only to be network group. And then we have the T1 line across the country that was simulation of the satellite to come later. And then we changed the focus to be teleconferencing. And once we were teleconferencing, we say, why not do video also? And there was no vocoder in existence that could do video in the rate that we want in packets. So it was only one by CLI, but it was not packetized. You needed the entire line. We needed packets that could be shared. So we have to build hardware. And the one we built at ISI is 8 parallel TI speech processing chips running in parallel, which was very interesting things. And then so we started having video teleconferencing, and there were several other offshoots of that, of this effort.
But that was around the late 70s, early 80s, right?
About.
And the packet voice in the packet radio network, that was what year? When you're saying the SatNet was first.
Pardon?
There was voice first on SatNet before on PRNet.
For an IP, you mean?
I mean, there was the packet radio network, which was its own protocol.
Mm-hmm.
And they were doing voice.
Yeah, and we were interconnected through some gateways.
Right.
Before IP existed, because with IP you would have done each of them on IP. Right. At 1961, I believe, but I may be wrong.
70.
Pardon?
71, you mean?
In 1960, let's call it 1961, and then correct it, yeah. It was my first wedding. First time I got married, and Bob Kahn came to town. And it was Friday night, we have a big party. Saturday morning, we took Bob, put him in a car, and we drove to the Santa Monica, to the, I can't believe I forgot the name. I drove him to a local airport, got into a Cessna 182, which I flew, needless to say, and flew on, and we have a radio. And we have one ham radio at ISI and one ham radio with us in a plane. And they connected through a different a third computer, such that we could do voice over IP from the plane, from the flying plane over Los Angeles to ISI, and from ISI using the internet, the Arpanet to Washington, from Washington to windsurf home. And he was home, and Bob Kahn was in the plane, and they could handle a connection. And I forgot if it was voice, or maybe it was only telnet. It was probably only telnet, probably voice was not running in such a small volume at the time. And the entire exercise cost us $600 to demonstrate it. And the cost of the $600 was not for the plane rental, but was for for building some PCB that needed for some processing and connection the two sides of the communication. When we landed at what's the name of the place? I can't believe I forgot it. After we landed, Bob Kahn asked how much did it cost, and we say $600, and he say, please don't show it to anyone. Because it was few $1 million to get the similar functionality from SRI. SRI, as a matter of fact, has much more functionality, but the basic functionality of connection from a mobile flying platforms, was demonstrated. And for years we did not tell anyone.
So this was the competitor to the SRI packet radio vendor.
Mm-hmm. No, we did not compete because we did not participate in
Right.
the...
But I mean, you were demonstrating similar functions.
Yes. It would be very funny if there was an RFP and they came with $10 million and we came with $600. As a matter of fact, in that case, I bet we would not have won because they would have said, well, you have so much more capacity. Whatever. I promised not to tell it, and until very recently I did not.
So this would have probably been mid-'70s then,
Yes.
because the packet radio van started about 73. So, and it took a little while to get going.
And I'm trying to think when I got married the first time.
But the first time you said you got married in Israel, right?
Yeah. So you're right, it was the second marriage, which explains a lot. Yeah. Too many marriages.
Huh?
Too many marriages.
How many?
Two. The same, the two spelled both with the W and with the double O. Too many. Never mind.
W and W. You lost me.
Two marriages, which were two T-O-O. Too many.
Right, yeah.
That's what I try to say.
Too many? Or?
Yeah.
So your second marriage was in the mid-'70s then?
Yeah. Yeah, this explains it. I'm glad we have this session here.
Now you will have it straight from now on.
Oh, yeah, at least for a while.
Because in 1961 you were not yet a pilot. You had not yet written a flight simulator, so yeah. But when did Steve Kasner come into this?
Steve joined ISI in '73, about 1 month after I did.
And did he immediately get involved in the packet voice?
And he was assigned to my project. And he worked on the operating system support that we needed. And later he was a focal point in IETF for real-time traffic. And guess what? It was the traffic, the protocol they developed was called RTP, for real-time protocol. And he took what I have in NVP and removed the things that were not general, that were specific to voice. And such that RTP is part of NVP. So today, if I build it, I would know I would build NVP differently if I would using RTP.
But so his role within your project?
It was Mr. Networking and computer and local computer communication.
Local computer.
Pardon?
Mr. Networking and
the local operating system talking to the internet, whatever version it was at the time.
And so he was involved. How long was he involved at ISI then?
Until he left, which was probably 20 years later.
Okay.
10 or 20 years later.
And he remained in the involved with voice
Yes.
over IP.
He was involved in it after he left ISI. It's a pleasure to work with. He's a great guy, both nice and smart.
No, and I know you both did the presentation at Google, right?
Yes.
And so, when was the Mickey Mouse phone?
Oh, I don't remember.
In the SRI van, there were the tests of...
I don't remember.
And that would not have been Steve.
The SRI guys did it.
Okay.
So we were somehow informed or involved about it, but not participating in really doing anything.
So who would have been the people at SRI doing that then?
Errol Craighill or something like that. Or, and I forgot the other name. It was another guy that did most of the radio work, or a big part of it. Whose name I forgot. But if interested, a good reading will be Bob Gray book.
Which book is that?
Bob Gray is a professor at MIT for signal processing. His brother, Augustine Gray, was part of the team in Santa Barbara. First at UCSB, and later in a company called Signal Technology Incorporated, STI. And he contributed a lot, but he did not like to fly. So in fact, he was scared to fly, so he couldn't come to any meeting, except meetings at Los Angeles, which we had very few of. So his brother, Bob, wanted somehow to memorialize, let's say, the contribution of his brother. So he wrote a book about linear prediction and packet networking. And I think that the title is something very similar to what I said. Linear prediction coding was the coding that we used for speech compression. And most of it was developed in the West Coast. So there is a book that called Linear Prediction Coding and Packet Networking, or something similar to that. And which is very, very well written, the book. And unlike most scientific books, it has many anecdotes and funny things that happened, or interesting things that happened.
And what was ISI like to work at the time? Were you in one of those the two buildings, the tall buildings?
Yes.
In, I
was in the southern of the two.
Right. The southern, where ICANN is now?
Pardon?
The one that ICANN is in now?
I have no idea where ICANN is. If you are in the ocean side, it would be on your right.
If your back is to the ocean.
If your back is to the ocean.
Is to the ocean.
Mm-hmm. Then it would be on your right.
I think that's the ICANN.
It's most likely.
I mean, Bob Braden today is in the building that would be north.
I have not been at ISI since they split between the two. I'm surprised he's not near ICANN. Yeah, but
no, it's in the other building, I believe. I know I visited the north building.
Yeah.
But so you were in somewhere up high in the building overlooking the ocean then?
Mm-hmm. And I had a corner office that was looking both west on the marina where my boat was, and south where the used aircraft runway was. It is now all built condos, but before that there was an airport of used aircraft, and lots of experimental aircraft would come to get some systems being put on and off. And since I like aeroplane, I was spending lots of time looking at them. So that's why I had a corner office.
And but you were what, a principal investigator there?
Sorry, say again?
What was your title?
Division director.
What?
Division director.
And the division was?
For a long time it was communication. And in addition, I was involved in lots of other things and started other projects. Like in 1980, I started Moses. And about 2-3 years later, I started the Fast Exchange. It had different names. I forgot what it was. But it was computerized commerce.
And what was that about? Or actually, let's cover that in order. Let's finish with voice. So, I mean, you were in the same building from 73 or so on.
Mm-hmm.
And where were you living at the time? You said Malibu or something.
I lived always within a mile, within half a mile from the beach. So first in the marina and then later in Pacific Palisades.
But you said you were near where the Getty is.
Yeah, this is the Pacific Palisades, near the Getty. The Getty is in Malibu, or was in Malibu.
Well, there's two of them, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you were, where did you fly out of then?
Venice, that's the name I could not remember. I tried Venice.
But that's pretty far inland, that's the valley.
Yeah, but there were better aircraft there. There was an ILS system, which means I could always land. And if I flew from Santa Monica, which I did for a while, you can get caught in fog that would make it impossible to land. And then it is a total pain landing elsewhere, and your car is in the original place. So how do I get from here to there? And in the morning you have to do the inverse. Too complicated. In Venice, there is an ILS system. You can land in any weather.
And did your family fly with you, or?
Most of the time not.
Colleagues, or did you fly mostly alone?
Oh, yeah, mostly colleagues. For most people, it's a huge street to fly and sit in the front and on holding the stick for a while. Yeah. I like to do it before I would fly myself, and I know that every boy, regardless of size and age, would love to do that.
Yeah, my elementary school, we did that with.
What?
The principal was a pilot.
So he took people as a reward for.
Well, he let us take the controls briefly. So, I don't know if it was a reward. But the people at ISI, I mean, you had your own group, but was it an exciting place to work? What kind of?
I think for most people it was.
So what was the atmosphere like?
No, first of all, we did not know that there was issue of funding or not enough funds. When we wanted to do something, if it was a good idea, it was always funded. Not only that it was funded with using very fast procedures. That it was not like writing a proposal and getting it approved, 2 years later, where all the people that were supposed to work on it and wrote the proposal are gone. When we needed something and it was reasonable, we got it very fast. And so from time to time we have some ideas, there was no question, sure.
And funding was from who? I mean, ARPA, obviously.
Basically ARPA.
Okay. So mostly. And did you have many formal interactions with UCLA and other ARPA contractors?
There were some, but all of them were part of the ARPA works. I don't know whether to call them informal or not.
Did you go to UCLA much in that period?
Well, UCLA is where I learned to scuba dive, for example. And from time to time we would visit them to see something interesting that they did. And from time to time they came to see when we did something interesting.
And were you much in touch with Len Kleinrock's group
Yes, we did. When the Arpanet started, their group was doing the network measurement
Center.
NMS? No, it was different.
NMC.
Oh, NMC or something like that, I don't remember. But they did lots of the simulation work and planning work and analysis in support of the theoretical work that Lenny did.
And how about, so you would go over there and
we have lots of meetings either in our place or their place.
And Santa Barbara, did you have much to do with?
Yeah, from time to time we went to Santa Barbara, especially in the early days when we worked on the algorithms, on the compression algorithms.
Ah, because right. So what was describe a typical day?
At ISI?
Yeah.
Getting to work at 9-ish, leaving office at 9-ish. Those are different 9s. I talk. Either have a project meeting about a new problem, or we are stuck with it, what shall we do? So there were meetings. In those days I used to program a lot. Some of the people work on operating systems issues. Some work on the signal processing issues. I usually work on the signal processing side. And then wondering at the end of the day where all the time went. And enjoy every moment.
And would you eat? You would have lunch there, I assume.
It depends. Near the marinas there are lots of places to have lunch.
And you would have dinner at home or somewhere there?
It depends. People who have working wives or non-working wives have a bit different schedules.
And your wife worked?
No, it depends. If I have to come with yes or no, I would say yes, but so too many caveats. It should go with it, and that's not a good way to spend our time right now.
Okay. And your group was how many people, though?
I don't know. At The Voice, I take it probably like 7 people, The Voice. But in 80s, I started Moses, which was probably another 10 people, 5 to 10 people, depends. I forgot. So lots of projects, like for example, one of them was graphics, remote graphics project, which is another 4 or 5 people. I forgot which project I have. I hope I don't insult anyone.
And who were you working for?
Mostly Bob Kahn.
But didn't you have a manager at ISI?
No. I'm sorry, yes and no. The official answer is yes. Obviously, I worked for the director of ISI. The real answer is no, I worked for Bob. Bob and I decided what I should do.
And told the director?
And told the director, if we remembered.
And who was the director at the time?
Most of the time, Keith Ankefer.
And did you have a good relationship with him?
Most of the time, yes. After he left, his resume, after he left ISI, he worked for National Center for
NCSA?
Research Initiative, NCRI. And when he worked there, his official resume, the one that on the web page of CNRI, said that he spent, like 20 years at ISI, and mentioned one project only, which was working with me on Moses. So Keith sure appreciate what we did, and so us as the jewel of the crown.
So talk a little bit about Moses. When did that start?
Pardon?
Talk a little bit about Moses. When did that start?
Moses started at 1980. August 1980 was the first run. So the project started probably 4 or 5 months earlier than that. And we did lots of, I spent the year earlier at Caltech, being on the computer science faculty at Caltech, working with Ivan. Ivan was at Caltech that year, so he recruited me to come join him.
Okay.
Now, Ivan was the number 2 person in the department. The number 1 was Carver Mead. And Ivan and Carver did not see eye to eye on many issues, most of them technical, not personal, but technical. And we would have meetings and decide how to do something, and then Carver would do it totally differently. And Ivan would say, but we decided to do it this way. And Carver would say, yeah, but I didn't understand it, so I did it the way I understand better. And he got on Ivan's nerves very often. And I thought, why do I need to be here when the two of them are fighting all the time? So after a year, I came back to ISI.
Because you really relocated to Caltech.
No, I didn't relocate the house. I would not leave the beach for Pasadena. You have to be crazy.
Your office moved to Caltech for a year.
No, ISI was kind enough to say, I said, I'm leaving, I'm going to Caltech. And Keith said, why don't we call it leave of absence, like sabbatical? So go there, so in the meanwhile, we keep your office and keep your secretary. And the office at ISI was 5 minutes from home. The office at Caltech was 45 minutes. So practically anything I did, I kept the office and was there most of the time. And get much better secretarial support and much better support on anything I needed. So after a year, given that they were fighting all the time, I was delighted to go back to ISI. But in this year, I learned about VLSI in Carter's class. So I knew enough to be able to run Moses. Moses is an idea that came from Lynn Conway at Xerox Spark. And then we were funded to re-implement it for the ARPA community, ARPA VLSI community, which was a great community to be part of, by the way.
But you could send the plans over the Arpanet, send designs.
Yes, you send design over. The ARPA people can always send design over the Arpanet. People from other companies like Soyuz or Honeywell that were given permission to use Moses had to use other emails which didn't exist. I'm sorry, there was no standard way to send over email. Yeah. So we developed some ways that people using other networks could use through tunnels, other networks. So Moses was connected to several networks, and you can communicate to Moses using any of the network that we supported, like MCI network and I forgot all the names of them. You know the difference between tunnel and a bridge. A bridge is high and you can see it from far away. A tunnel is hidden, so unless you know exactly where it is, you'll never find it. So the people who we gave permission to use our tunnels. So people would use their other, like Telnet, to get to our tunnel and then use it to get to the Arpanet and get to Moses. And then the Moses will reply by doing the inverse, using the Arpanet to get to the tunnel, using the tunnel to get to the other network.
And what sort of data could you send?
Those were designs.
Right, but you could send large files.
Yeah, and we have to deal with the fact that our files were much bigger than what the email could handle. So we have to develop procedures that would allow you to break files and put them together. And there were several other little communication problems that had to be solved, and we obviously did.
But the idea is to be able to send in the design, and then it's actually created, right?
Mm-hmm. The original idea came from, I believe, from Lynn through Park. We sort of got it from Lynn while she was in Park, supported by Park people. So I don't know which of them deserves the credit.
And it's still operating today.
Oh, it's still operating today over, what is it, 1980. So it is 30 plus years later. And it is used.
So we're talking about Moses.
Moses.
And the fact I think you could do some testing over it, or?
Say again?
That you could send files, but couldn't it do some sort of simulation? Or
what I thought we were talking about was that most of our users could use the Arpanet to send us files.
Right.
But some of them could not use the Arpanet because they did not have ARPA contract and didn't have connection to the Arpanet.
And you said they could tunnel through
yes.
to get to it.
And so
right.
to solve the problems, we built a tunnel, which later we would have called it bridge. That is computer that is connected on one side to the Arpanet and the other side, say, to MCI network.
And you already described that.
Yeah.
But then what would they be sending? Just a design ready to be implemented, or would there be a back and forth?
It would be a design that always has to be fabricated.
Okay.
But being fabricated is the first step in a long chain of things that have to happen. Because what the user wants is not just the VLSI fabricated, but he wants it also to be tested, sewed into small dice, and attach the dies to the carrier. So by the time users gets back his project, it's all silicon ready to be inserted in a board and tested.
And so where would it physically be fabricated?
When we started, it was in any of 4 or 5 different fabrication houses. But now I think that most of them happen in Taiwan.
And what was the big arguments with, what was it, Carver Mead and
Ivan?
Yeah, where
Those arguments would happen when I was at Caltech, which is before I started Moses at ISI. So there is no relation.
Ah, okay. Because you were, sorry, I did get them confused. You were at Caltech for which project?
I was at Caltech for a year.
Just to become a professor there?
I was teaching graphics and learning VLSI.
Okay, right. And that's what gave you the background.
That gave me the background that I was able to start Moses. And I did lots of things. We didn't know how to do it, so we invented methods doing it, which were very different than the method used in the industry. And somehow we were lucky enough to get it right.
So how were your methods different?
For example, we had on wafers with dies of different sizes. The standard in the industry was to have all the dies be of the same size.
Okay, so it's fairly radical.
Yeah, it saves. It's not a big thing, but lots of little things together, like that together, made a difference.
And this was some of your first experience with really hands-on with hardware, or not? Well, you were mostly a software guy through your career.
Yeah, and most of the time I use things that are somewhere in between.
True. Compression gets you to the hardware level, that kind of thing.
Yeah, there are a lot of them. One company, I forgot which one. I think it was three or four letters. Never mind. In the valley, they looked at what we did, and they say that it would never work. And we say, never mind. We pay. You do it the way we ask. And they say, but if we do it their way, it would be faster or better or something. And I say, never mind, just do it my way. I'm the customer, I'm paying for it. And they say, okay. A few months later, they came to me and say, we noticed that you turn around designs in 2 months. It takes us 11 months to turn around our design with our engineers. Can we put some of our design on your wafers and we'll pay for it? And I reminded them that they told me that I don't know what I was doing, which, by the way, they were right, but we were lucky that our schemes worked.
And what was it? Do you remember what the methodology was, the difference?
The difference is that I thought about it as a software engineer.
But I'm saying, what were you proposing doing differently?
I showed them how to, for example, having dies of different size required to changing the process and do it in a slightly different way, or cutting a different way. Yeah, and in ways that were simple once you think about it, but if you didn't think about it, you are limited to do it one way. And there were lots of cases like that. And
so how long were you involved in Moses directly?
I started Moses in the beginning of Moses, which is the early 1980. And in 1980, and I think I stayed with them at about 1986, 87.
And why did you stop?
Because I found more interesting things to do. For example, I had a very heavy involvement with the Department of Defense and SDI, Star Wars.
All right.
Yeah. So I was delighted that someone else could run Moses. And I didn't have to, because it became routine after a while.
And who took it over?
George Lewicki. And if you ever find him, tell him to call me. He disappeared one day. Not that there was any foul play in his disappearance, but he didn't get along with the director, and the director didn't get along with it. So separation was the best solution. And he decided not to keep in touch with any of us. So let it be.
And so you moved to SDI type stuff.
I did the SDI stuff from my office at
right. But I mean, you moved on in terms of projects that became here.
And then one day I said that if the mechanisms that we have to run Moses could be used to run any general electronic commerce. The main difference was that in VLSI, not only tell you I need a chip, I tell you exactly how to build it. In normal commerce, you don't tell how to build it. You say, I want item number so-and-so from your catalog. And you say, yes, it costs so much, or no, we don't have it in stock, or whatever. But I don't ask you how, you don't ask me how to build it. And so it is easy to adopt our system. So we started a commerce, electronic commerce project. And DoD places could send us over email purchase orders. And they say, we need such and such part, and we need so many of them. And our computer will get this message and would know where to look, which vendors might have it, and connect to those vendors and negotiate price with them, and then give me the best price of them all. And the best price can be either the least dollars or the least time or combinations thereof. So we started this project, and then later it became a fast exchange, or forget what the name was. I called it FAST because it was supposed to be the acronym for Fast Acquisition of Standard Part. So this would make a P then. Of something with it, something good with a T.
But this actually was implemented?
Mm-hmm.
And
during the first Bush war, there's the problem that our planes were shooting our tanks because they were so uncoordinated. So someone came with the advice to put IFF devices on tanks. So when a pilot arrives to a tank, he can check whose tank is it. But to build it, they needed, and to build it fast, they needed some part that they could not locate in the States. In our system that was connected to lots of vendors could automatically locate some of the parts. And some of them were found in England and some of them were found in the States. But thanks to us, they got it real fast and could implement them fast. And we got a letter of appreciation from the Department of Defense after the war, which wasn't that long.
But when did you start fast exchange?
I sure was at Moses probably this was like late 80s. Okay. When was the first Gulf War?
91. So yeah, sounds right. And you had something on each of the vendors somehow made their catalog visible or queryable using what?
As a matter of fact, the funny thing is that the way we did it then was we asked each vendor, what's your format? And we adapted to their formats.
Really?
Today we would do it the other way around. We would say, this is our format. If you want to do business with that, you better use our format.
But how would they put their data?
To use us, they didn't have to do any change. They did not know if the connection that comes in the middle of the night and asking for quotations, if there was a person there or not. They could not tell. It's a Turing test.
Yeah. So it would come in as what, an email or a fax or something?
Yeah, over email. Everything is done by email.
And then they...
Today it's hard to think that this capability was an exception then. Today this is how most things are bought.
So they wouldn't necessarily have their catalog in electronic format. They
No.
would receive the message and a person would send back what they had.
No, I'm sorry, they have the catalog the way they wanted it.
But online.
Yeah, it was online.
It needed to be...
But their salesmen anyhow needed it online.
Right.
And their salesmen have programs to read the online thing and display it so a person could understand and make a decision or not make a decision.
So it would send a query as if it were a salesperson, in essence. I mean, your system.
It sent a query according to their standard operations.
And this was run from ISI? And you had what, a group of people working on this?
Yeah. And most of the work was on adapting, interfacing funny systems of other people.
And who funded the system initially?
ARPA.
Okay. And how many people were working on it?
Let me tell you how it was. We started, one day I was at ARPA in Washington, and I was about to leave to the airport, and I was on the 7th floor where Bob Kahn was in his group. And I was waiting for the elevator to take me from the 7th floor. And then the elevator came and Craig Fields was there. I don't know if you know Craig. Craig was a program manager and later he was a director of ARPA. And in his common style, he said to me, "Danny, what's new? What great idea are you working on now?" Which was semi-sarcastic a bit. And I say, and I thought that he would like the idea of the electronic exchange. So he asked me, what are you working on? And I say, I work on electronic commerce. And he said, what's that? So I explained to him, and he said to me, you know what? That's the best idea I heard in few years. Come to my office. We went to his office, and he sat near his Macintosh, probably Mac 2, and he typed a letter to this deputy director, Chuck Bufalano, or something like that, and say, Danny Cohen suggests to do such and such. I think it's a great idea. How much money do you need, Danny? I say, $1 million. He wrote, it would cost $1 million. Send it to Chuck, which was the deputy director of all ARPA. A few days later, he said to me, Danny, go ahead. And then he said, just a second, Danny, I know you're a very good friend with Bob Kahn. And if you do it directly with me rather than through Bob, you may be insulted. So which way do you want it to go, from me or from Bob? Being a good friend, I say from Bob. It cost me another year, because it took about a year for Bob to approve it. The reason is that Bufalano did not send $1 million. He said, I cut $2 million from your budget, and you should fund it from the money that I save. And Bob can say, you cannot cut $2 million from my program, because then my entire program would fall apart. I need every penny of it. And Bufalano could not convince Bob, even though he was higher than him on the hierarchy. Bob said, if you don't do that, then all of those things, fall apart. We cannot just cut a little. In retrospect, was it important that we lost 2 years? No.
But how did the money come through in the end? Did Bob get his budget cut?
Yeah, at the end he got it was a year later. Yeah. So at the time it looked to me like a big loss. Now, big deal, so what? It was either the easiest or the second easiest $1 million I got from ARPA. I had another call to ARPA that took about half an hour or slightly less. At the end of that talk, I was approved to spend another $1 million on something that was never proposed until then.
Which was?
Pardon? That has to do with the end of the Arpanet. For the Arpanet, those days we paid like ARPA paid DCA, Defense Communication Agency, I think $80,000 a month for each IMP port. And in Los Angeles there were like nearly 10 IMP ports. So it means $800,000 a month to DCA. And I said I can put, gateway did not exist yet. So I defined this functionality I can get to you for much less than that, for less than $500,000 a month. It was a huge difference. And Marc that was the program manager, said, okay, you can do it. You are allowed to spend, like $1 million to save me all of that things. It was illegal, I'm sure, but it saved the government lots of money, and there was never anyone suspecting anything bad about it. But that was a really very different ARPA than ARPAs of today, of the government of today. And we were lucky that there were people that were willing to risk their necks because they thought something should be done better.
Yep. Then there are several other efforts you're involved in. Atomic, what was that?
Yeah, Atomic was very fast. At the time, maybe it was the fastest communication inside the multi-computer. Multi-computer has many CPUs, and communication between some CPUs. And we did this demonstration, Atomic, to demonstrate this technology that was developed at Caltech. It came from Caltech, and we used it to build local area network. They thought about it only as a network inside the computer, and we extended it to be between computers, provided they were not very far from each other.
So sort of local distributed computing.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because at that speed, they could deal with each other almost as if they were within the same.
Yeah, they were awfully fast, like 600 megabit per second, which today is a funny number.
And then there's Miracom and Miranet.
Miracom is the name of the private company that we build to commercialize the atomic technology. And the network that we sold, we called Miranet. Miracom was the name of the company, and Miranet was the name of the network.
And so where did you start it with who? Who's we?
A group of about 10 people, 8 of them from Caltech, and 2 from ISI. The ISI was Bob Felderman and me. And the Caltech side was Chuck Seitz, who really was the leader of this effort. And another 6 or 7 people, that most of them from Caltech.
And it was a company in LA? Or?
Company in Pasadena called Miracom. And for awfully long time, we are profitable, but the amount of money is too small to take it to IPO. And therefore, all of us are not as rich as we expected one day to be.
But it's still going.
It is still going, but I have no idea for how long it will. Right now, I believe they are slightly above profitability. So they can survive, but without making us rich. We are not the only people in the valley that can use those words.
And then distributed interactive simulation. You
This-
did
this-
several DoD, but you talked about them.
Yeah, the DIS, distributed interactive simulation, is from, what was it, ISI? I wasn't in, probably early 80s. And the same Craig Fields that we mentioned before was at ARPA, and when he saw computer games coming to life, at the beginning of he said, this is technology that I can use for training real forces. And they did a network, a simulated network, that tanks, unit, I don't know what's the unit of tanks, like 10 tanks, what is it, platoon or whatever, some word. So a group of tanks can fight another group of tanks, using the same, practicing their tactics rather than the actual driving. And this was done for the army by ARPA. And the ARPA asked the army to consult me. So I was consulting to them, and I appeared like a month. So what they're doing and making some comments. Like, for example, told them to use the Arpanet and not the ISO network. That we're about to be born. It never did, but...
What year would that have been?
Pardon?
What year would that have been, do you think?
That must be around 1980.
Well, OSI was just getting started then, but yeah.
Yeah, and they expected, they wanted to run their programs on OSI, ISO protocols. And I kept telling them that it would never exist. And they were lucky enough to pay some attention.
And then I did want to, this is a little bit out of sequence because it was really about the video over the net, but and voice over the net. But the movie that you did was what, or very early 80s? The one
I think, or maybe 78.
Or no, late 70s, right.
It's inside the movie, it says so.
Yes. But I mean, tell me about why you made the movie and the process of making it.
We have this teleconferencing system. And from time to time, we wanted to explain it and demonstrate it to DoD people. So they would come to ISI at 4 o'clock, and we talk about it, and now we say, now is a demo. Oops, it's 5 o'clock, 8 o'clock in Boston. No one is waiting for us. Now, it was not the service. It was always a problem that you could not, that coordinating with other sites was a problem. So one day I said, enough of those things. Why do you need the other side? Let's just do it with a movie. The advantage of a movie is that you can get it done until you get it right. And so once we decided to do a movie, I found some young lady at Los Angeles that was very good in preparing it. And she came and she prepared the movie for us. And she knew what she was doing. Luckily, we did not, because we didn't know the difference between, as I told you before, between footage and movie. We had several times on several projects people doing movies Lincoln Lab did a movie about speech compression. The movie was 20 minutes of someone talking to the camera. Who has the patience to sit to watch for 20 minutes one person talk? We don't, you know. Why do we expect it in a movie? So she came and she did this great movie. For example, for the greatness, we wanted to show that this is compatible with normal telephones, that you can call from the computer to a telephone and vice versa, very much like Skype today. We never said it in the movie, but in the movie, I'm supposed to be I'm running on the deck, on the in the marina, running between the boats to a telephone booth. It obviously, the telephone booth was connected to the standard telephone network, but we didn't have to say it. That probably the only thing you remember from the movie, that it is connected to the network, because Danny was running into a telephone booth, using payphone, and getting the wrong number first. So she knew what to do and how to do. So for $5,000, we got a 5 minutes footage that is absolutely delight to see.
And did you, I mean, obviously that does show some of your vision of what you thought a packet voice would be used for. I mean, but did it happen, were there any other ideas that you have that didn't happen?
For example, one of the things that we did, you could see it in the movie, is voting. Like if we take a vote, and we say if it is you want to use yes, hit 9. This is where the Y is. And if you want to no, use 6. Or we chose 2 other numbers. I'm not sure, but today I would have chosen those for yes and no. And you say, and so everyone can punch it, and so you immediately know that it is 6-4. Otherwise, you have to say, who is number 1? You know, Bob, or what? And you have to poll the people, which take much more time. It is much more complicated if you have floor control by one person because of several reasons. So we did it in a better way. For example, I did not see this idea implemented, but I saw many cases that I wish I had it. That there's a big meeting and you have to scan the people and you don't know who is where. And some people join the conference while you were talking, so you are not aware yet. So this is just one example of doing things differently. In the movie we didn't discuss it, but we showed it.
And did voice over IP come more slowly than you thought?
Yeah, because voice over IP as a commercial operation is to wait until the prices were practical. We, as I told you before, we proved feasibility, not practicality. And you had to wait for Mr. Moore to go several times through the cost curves and performance curves to be in position to be able to eat economically. But what we did was to prove that it's technically feasible.
And talk a little, if you will, about the reaction to your Holy War paper on Indianness.
Yes. The Holy War paper started about, I can't remember where it was. It must be early 80s or maybe late 70s.
1980, I think, no?
Where this problem of direction became crucial, and there were lots of networks were defined at the time, including the Ethernet, the IEEE Ethernet 802.3, which is not like not like the Xerox original Ethernet. There was a small difference that later was fixed. But there were many committees, including the 802.3, that found it very relevant. And I would get phone calls and say, I'm so-and-so from such and such company, and we want a copy of your paper, but we have a copy of a copy of a copy when we cannot Xerox it anymore. Would you be kind enough and send us another copy? And there was a very short period in which lots of people asked for it. And it sort of cleared the thinking about it for many people. So we did not say do it this way or this way. We say it's your choice, but here are the things that it affects, and this is how you think about it. So this paper did not recommend big Indian or little Indian. It just explained the issue and the consequences, other than telling you how to do it. Many people today tell me that I should have decided then. Too bad.
Well, maybe it would have been less effective if you had been making a clear recommendation.
You know, if I made the choice. Yeah. As we mentioned before, when I talked with Paula before, it's easier to bring something new than to change something existing.
That's true.
Because when you do something new, you don't find any ego. When you do something, when you ask anyone to change anything, you have an ego war with the person that made the previous system.
Very true. Are there any of you have several patents, are there any in particular that?
No, I think that all of them are too technical.
Okay.
It's not that you could not understand it, but it would be to establish the content would take much more time than we should.
And do you want to talk about your work out here? I mean, you moved to the Bay Area to Sun when?
In Sun Lab, I was part of the ARPA project with high performance computing. We didn't call it high performance, we called it something else, which was also HP. High productivity, it was called. And it was a three-stage program. And then we were participating in stage 1 and 2. And luckily our proposal for stage 3 was not accepted. And I say luckily because we were all relieved, because we were promising that we were really on the cutting edge of technology. So we were relieved not to be called on the carpet to demonstrate what we predicted we can do.
But when did you move to Sun?
To Sun about 10 years ago.
And Ivan Sutherland was there as well, right?
Yes.
So.
It was one of the things that attracted me.
And you hadn't worked with him since way back?
Since Michael Tech days,
yeah.
Since 76. Wow, that's a long time.
Anything you want to say about your years at Sun?
I rather not. But they were great years. There was a great bunch of people around.
So Ivan, who else?
Bob Sproul.
And to sort of sum up, did you have different visions for how networking would turn out than it actually did? Any surprises to you?
What I'm surprised that all the phenomena called social networks, there's a company like Facebook has 800 million subscribers, which I could not believe that something like that could happen. If you came to me with any of the big success stories 5 years earlier and asked me what I think about this business plan, I'd say they are crazy. Would you believe people will give for free search engine that will scroll all over the internet and charge you nothing for that? Yeah. Would you believe that Facebook support messages and bio information for 800 million people and would not charge anything for that? You guys must be crazy. Yeah, neither Facebook nor Google are things that I could imagine to exist, not to mention as a success. All the graphics in the movies and each of their image is like at least 1,000 times more sophisticated than the images that we had. We had line drawings. They have full color. Every pixel could be at any color, any shade, any time. Today's images you could mistake for photograph. You cannot tell that they are, on many of them that they are synthetic images. I could not have believed that this would be possible so fast. When you have a single chip with teraops operation or terabit capacity, that's totally crazy.
So where do you think it'll be 10 years from now?
Unfortunately, I cannot predict because I'm too much because I still have time to adapt to today's technology. And one should start it by thinking small, like a fork 50 years from now. Would it be the same way as it is today? Or maybe to the laser cutter that would cut the food in a vacuum suction to hold the food and you take it to your mouth. Or maybe you don't eat, you just take pills. No, I don't want it. But maybe. I don't know.
Personally, I'm voting for genetic engineering. Give us tentacles around our mouth. It'll pick it up for us. But,
yeah,
that's just me.
People with a beard would need it.
Anyway, thank you very much.
You are most welcome. And when you hear great ideas about the future, please share them with me. I'd love to hear them. Great, thank you.
Thank you.